It was a cold, gray morning in the sleepy town of Pine Hollow, Oregon. The kind of day that pressed heavily on the heart and stung the fingers with a bitter chill. Caleb Bryant adjusted his jacket as he helped his 6-year-old son, Noah, into the back seat of their weathered SUV. Being a single dad wasn't easy, but after 3 years of raising Noah alone since his wife, Laura, passed away from cancer, Caleb had learned how to keep their little world spinning. Meals on the table, school drop-offs, late night fevers, broken toys, all of it. Life had settled into a rhythm of quiet routines, where laughter was measured and silence lingered longer than it should. As Caleb pulled away from their driveway and turned onto Maple Street, his eyes caught sight of someone unusual. Someone who didn't belong to the pattern of his regular morning route. At the bus stop near the old gas station sat a woman, slumped on a bench, dressed in a faded military uniform, with a camouflage duffel bag by her side. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she held a paper coffee cup with shaking fingers. Her eyes were hollow, scanning the empty street ahead with a look Caleb recognized instantly. Exhaustion, but not just the physical kind. It was the kind that came from carrying pain too heavy to speak aloud. Something stirred in Caleb. He could have kept driving. He should have by most standards. But something about the soldier's posture. She curled into herself like she didn't expect to be noticed, pulled at something deep in him. An ache, a memory, a silent cry that matched his own. Without a second thought, Caleb slowed the car and pulled over. Noah glanced up from his dinosaur coloring book in the back seat, curious but quiet. Rolling down the passenger window, Caleb leaned slightly toward her. "Hey," he said gently, not wanting to startle her. "You waiting for the bus?" The woman turned her head slowly, eyes red-rimmed, and nodded. "Yeah. Trying to get to Portland," she replied, her voice raspy, like it hadn't been used much lately. Caleb studied her for a second longer. She couldn't have been older than 30. "It's freezing out here. I'm headed past there. You want a ride?" Her eyes narrowed slightly, defensive, unsure. "I'm good. Really. Don't want to be a bother." Caleb smiled. "It's no bother. Name's Caleb. That's my son Noah. We're decent folks, promise." She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. "I'm Sergeant Dani Reyes," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of a title she wasn't sure she still deserved. Caleb stepped out into the cold, opening the back of the SUV. "Well, Sergeant Reyes, come on. Let's get you out of the wind." After a long pause, Dani picked up her duffel bag and climbed into the front seat. Noah offered her a shy wave, which she returned with a small nod. The car filled with the smell of damp canvas and old coffee, but also with something unspoken, an invisible connection of two people who knew loss too intimately. The ride began in silence. Caleb kept his questions to himself, respecting the kind of quiet that only those who've been to war, or to hell and back, carry like a second skin. Noah, oblivious to the tension, chattered about school projects and how he was going to be a dinosaur hunter when he grew up. Dani smiled faintly, eyes staring out the window, but Caleb noticed how she flinched when a loud truck passed by, her hand briefly gripping the seatbelt like a lifeline. It didn't take a therapist to recognize the tremors of trauma. Caleb had known those sleepless nights, the ones where grief curled around your chest like a fist. But he also knew the importance of small kindnesses, the kind that don't demand anything in return. "What's in Portland?" he asked softly, just to break the silence. Dani shrugged. "Just heading somewhere. Don't really have a plan. Thought I'd find a shelter, maybe a job. Start over." Her words were clipped, guarded. "You got family?" Caleb asked, not prying, just curious. "Not anymore," she replied, staring ahead. That was all she said. That was all he needed to hear. The storm worsened as they drove, wind picking up, and the radio reporting icy roads ahead. Caleb glanced at Dani, then made a decision. You know, he said casually, it's getting nasty out. Got a spare room at the house. No pressure, but it's warm. And my kids got 100 stuffed animals to protect you if anything goes wrong. Dani raised an eyebrow. You always pick up strangers from bus stops and invite them into your home. Caleb smiled. Only the ones who look like they've forgotten what home feels like. She was silent for a moment before nodding slightly. Okay. Just for the night. Caleb didn't push further. He just drove. When they arrived at the small, cozy house on the edge of town, Dani followed him inside quietly. Noah ran in first, grabbing his toy T-Rex from the couch and announcing, "This is Rexy. He's our guard dinosaur." Dani chuckled under her breath, a tiny moment of light breaking through the heavy clouds that surrounded her. Caleb showed her to the guest room and offered a towel and some old clothes of Laura's, folded neatly in a drawer no one had opened in a while. Dani took them with a quiet, "Thanks." She disappeared into the bathroom. The door clicked shut. Caleb stood in the hallway for a second, feeling a strange peace settle over him. Not relief, exactly. The soft nudge of something beginning. Maybe not all broken things needed fixing. Some just needed a place to rest. And maybe, just maybe, that cold morning had brought more than just a passing soldier into his life. Maybe it had brought a turning point. The morning sun crept in softly through the thin curtains of the guest room, casting pale gold shadows across the worn hardwood floor. Dani Rise stirred for the first time in nearly 14 hours, her body aching with a bone, deep exhaustion only soldiers and survivors knew. She had not intended to sleep that long. Hadn't planned to fall asleep at all. Really. But once her head hit the pillow the night before, the silence and warmth of Caleb's home had wrapped around her like a sedative. No gunfire in the distance, no shouts or barked orders, no overhead choppers. Just the muffled sound of cartoons playing from another room. And the comforting scent of brewed coffee drifting from the kitchen. Dani sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. For a moment, disoriented, she reached for the weapon that was no longer by her side. Then she remembered. She wasn't in a base, or a tent, or a bunker. She was in a stranger's house, a single father's home, where a little boy had drawn her a picture, and a man with kind eyes had offered her a room without demanding anything in return. She padded down the hallway in borrowed sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, her muscles still stiff. In the kitchen, Caleb was flipping pancakes, and Noah sat at the table enthusiastically coloring a picture of what looked like a half-dinosaur, astronaut creature. Caleb looked up and gave her a warm, easy smile that made her feel both seen and safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Morning," he said. "Hope you like pancakes. They're kind of our Saturday tradition." Dani hesitated, hovering near the doorway. "You didn't have to make me anything. You didn't have to say yes yesterday, either," he replied simply. "But you did." She didn't know what to say to that, so she sat down across from Noah, who grinned and pushed a glass of orange juice toward her like it was a peace offering. "I made you a drawing," he said proudly. "You're a superhero in this one. See, you've got a rocket launcher arm." Dani looked at the paper, and despite herself, "Wow, I've never looked more dangerous." Caleb set a plate in front of her with a stack of golden pancakes and a side of strawberries. Dangerous, maybe, but definitely appreciated. For the rest of the morning, Dani barely spoke. She mostly listened. Listened to Caleb talk about the neighborhood. Noah talk about his upcoming school science project. The birds chirping outside the kitchen window. It was a strange kind of normalcy, one she hadn't experienced in years. She kept waiting for it to collapse under its own weight, like everything else in her life had. After breakfast, Dani offered to help with dishes, and Caleb, surprised but grateful, handed her a towel. The silence between them was companionable. Still, Caleb could sense the wall she'd built around herself, sturdy, high, and lined with barbed wire. He didn't try to climb it. Instead, he asked gentle questions. How long were you deployed? He ventured as he rinsed a pan, dried a plate before answering. 3 tours, Afghanistan, Syria. Last one ended 6 weeks ago. That's a long time, Caleb said softly. Must have been hard. She shrugged, automatic gesture. Harder being back. He didn't push her, just nodded. Dani appreciated that more than she could say. Everyone else seemed to want a story, a confession, a hero's tale. Caleb just handed her another dish. Later, while Noah was outside playing with a stick he'd declared laser sword, Dani wandered into the living room and looked at the photos on the shelf. A wedding picture. Caleb with a beautiful blonde woman, both smiling like they had the world ahead of them. Pictures of Noah as a baby, as a toddler in Halloween costumes, covered in chocolate cake at a birthday party. She was beautiful, Dani said quietly when Caleb entered the room. He followed her gaze. Laura. His voice was soft but steady. Cancer took her 3 years ago. Fast. One day we were talking about remodeling the kitchen. 2 months later, I was holding her hand in a hospital bed saying goodbye. Dani turned toward him, surprised by the openness. My too, he said, giving a sad smile. But we're managing. Noah keeps me grounded. She nodded, understanding more than she could say. It's funny, he continued. When I saw you at that bus stop, I don't know, something just told me you needed someone. And maybe I needed someone too. Dani swallowed hard. Her throat ached, not from speaking but from holding back everything she hadn't let herself feel in weeks. No months. Maybe years. I didn't think anyone would notice, she whispered. That I was falling apart. Caleb stepped forward, careful not to crowd her. Sometimes, the strongest people are the ones falling the quietest. Dani didn't reply. Her defenses were still high, but something cracked. Barely, but enough to let a little light in. That night, Caleb offered her the room for a few more days. No pressure, he added, seeing the hesitation in her face. But there's no bus until Monday anyway, and the weather's getting worse. Dani nodded, almost too quickly. She wasn't ready to admit she didn't want to leave just yet. She dreamt again, the same dream she always had. Sand, blood, shouting. A face she couldn't save. She woke with a start, drenched in sweat, heart hammering. The walls were unfamiliar. Her breathing was loud in the darkness. Then, a soft knock. Caleb's voice, low but calm. You okay? She hesitated before answering. Just. I get those too, he said through the door. You're safe here. And somehow, those 3 simple words were more comforting than any therapy session she'd ever attended. She lay back down, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, believed maybe that was true. Maybe, just maybe, she was safe. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Dani with its simplicity. There was no schedule, no missions, no superior officers barking orders, just the soft unfolding of ordinary life in Caleb's home. A life she never imagined herself part of. She hadn't planned to stay beyond the weekend. But Monday came and went, the storm lingered, and Caleb never once mentioned her leaving. Instead, he poured her coffee each morning, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and asked if she wanted scrambled or fried eggs, always giving her space to say no but smiling every time she said yes. Noah, ever the energetic little whirlwind, had taken to Dani as though she'd always been around. He greeted her each morning with an enthusiastic, "Good morning," and had started asking her to teach him things. How to salute properly, how to march, sneak like a ninja scout. She played along at first amused, but then found herself genuinely enjoying his company. His innocence softened something in her, something that had grown rigid from years of war, of loss, of moving base to base with only a rucksack and duty weighing her down. For the first time in years, she felt the corners of her mouth lift in something resembling a smile, real, unforced, unexpected. One afternoon, Dani found herself in the backyard, helping Caleb repaint the old, rusted swing set. It had been Noah's mother's idea to install it. Caleb told her, before she got sick. The paint had faded, and some of the bolts had rusted, but with a bit of effort, it could shine again. Dani held the frame steady, while Caleb tightened bolts and talked about how Laura used to sit on the porch with a book, always keeping one eye on their son as he played. Dani listened silently, not out of discomfort, but out of respect. There was no bitterness in Caleb's voice, only remembrance, and a kind of peace Dani had never seen in anyone who had lost something so deep. She realized then how different their wounds were. His was scarred over, still tender but healing. Hers was still raw, hidden beneath armor, even she couldn't see through. Later that day, when Caleb went inside to take a call, Dani sat on the swing alone, slowly rocking back and forth. The sun filtered through the clouds, warming her face. For a moment she let her eyes close and imagined a different life. One where she had grown up in a town like this, where she had never gone to war, where the quiet was natural and not suspicious. A life where her parents hadn't died in a car crash when she was 17, pushing her to enlist, because it was the only way out. A life where maybe, just maybe, she could have been someone softer. That night, after Noah had gone to bed, Caleb brought out 2 mugs of tea and joined her on the porch. They sat in silence, the kind that spoke louder than words, wrapped in blankets against the early spring chill. Dani sipped her tea and stared up at the stars. "I forgot how bright they can be," she said softly, "when you're not in a desert or a base full of floodlights." Caleb nodded. "Out here, it's one of the few things that makes you feel like you're still part of something big." She turned to look at him. "Do you ever feel like you're pretending to be okay for everyone else's sake?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He took a long sip of his tea, then said, "Every day for the first year after Laura died. I smiled for Noah, I kept the house clean, I made lunches, I laughed at cartoons. But inside, I felt like I was hollow. Everything I did was an act to keep the grief from swallowing me." Dani stared at the mug in her hands. "I've been pretending since I got off the plane. Since the army said, walked away." "And now?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "No, I don't know. Being here..." Her voice caught, and she looked away. "It's like I can breathe again, a little. Maybe there's a version of me that still fits into the world." Caleb smiled, not pushing for more. "I think there is. I see her already." The next day, Dani woke up earlier than usual and made breakfast for the first time since her deployment ended. Nothing fancy, just scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced apples. But when Caleb walked into the kitchen, his surprise was genuine. "You cook now?" he teased. She shrugged. "I figured I've mooched off you enough. Time to earn my keep." He smiled, warmth in his eyes. "Well, I'll gladly accept. But for the record, you were never mooching." Noah came bouncing in a few minutes later, still in his pajamas and rubbing his eyes. "Something smells yummy," he announced, grabbing a plate like a soldier reporting for duty. Dani laughed. It startled her how easy the sound came. Later, as Caleb drove Noah to school, Dani stayed behind and cleaned up. She paused at the kitchen table, running her hand across its wooden surface, tracing the faint scratches and crayon marks that told a story of family, of messes made and cleaned up again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. That evening, when Caleb returned, he found Dani in the garage tinkering with the broken leg of a small bookshelf. "You're full of surprises," he said, leaning against the doorway. She looked up, wiping her hands on a rag. "Army teaches you a few things. Improvising with broken parts is one of them." "You're not broken," Caleb said quietly, catching her off guard. "You've just been carrying too much for too long." Her throat tightened, and for a second she couldn't speak. But she didn't need to. The way she looked at him said enough. "Thank you, I'm trying. I don't know if I'm there yet." That night, she slept without nightmares. No screams, no gunfire, no desert wind in her ears. Just the soft hum of the heater and the steady beat of hope returning, one breath at a time. The first signs of spring arrived quietly in Pine Hollow, with daffodils nudging through the thawing earth and children's laughter ringing faintly from backyards. By then, Dani Reyes had been living in Caleb Bryant's home for nearly a month. Though it no longer felt like she was just staying. Her duffel bag, permanently zipped at the foot of the guest bed, had slowly been unpacked, contents merging into drawers and closets with quiet hesitation. The guest room had started to reflect her presence. A pair of worn combat boots by the door, a book half read on the nightstand, a photo of her squad beside Noah's crayon, drawings taped to the wall. She had found work at a local security company. A part-time position that gave her structure without suffocating her. Every evening, she returned to a dinner table, already set with mismatched plates, where Caleb would smile and Noah would greet her like a sibling returning from battle. The house was no longer just warm. It was familiar. Yet Dani still wrestled with the weight of everything she carried. Trauma didn't leave in a day. It didn't even leave when life got good. It stayed, coiled like a snake in the shadows of her mind, waiting for silence, waiting for night. But somehow, in Caleb's presence, that weight felt lighter. He never demanded explanations. He never asked her to be anything but who she was. And that quiet, constant kindness was beginning to chip away at the shell she had wrapped around her heart. One Sunday morning, as the sunlight poured into the kitchen, Noah bounded in from outside, carrying a bunch of slightly squashed wildflowers. "These are for Dani," he announced proudly, holding out the bouquet. "Because she's the strongest girl I know." Dani knelt, accepting the flowers with a laugh that almost turned into a sob. "You're going to make me cry, kid," she said, ruffling his hair. "You're a hero," he said matter-of-factly, "just like my mom." Caleb's eyes caught hers over Noah's head, and in that moment, passed between them, wordless, deep, and fragile. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch watching cartoons, Dani stood at the window, watching the trees sway gently under the moonlight. Caleb joined her, 2 mugs in hand, and they stood in comfortable silence. "I think he's starting to believe you're staying," Caleb said softly. Dani took the mug and held it tightly. "Yeah, I might be. Not just until the next bus?" he asked, a teasing smile in his voice, though his eyes were serious. "No," she said. "Not just until then." The porch light buzzed faintly above them. Dani set her cup down. "You know, I never thought I'd have anything like this. Not after everything." Caleb turned toward her, leaning on the railing. She shrugged, eyes fixed on the stars. "A second chance. A quiet life. A kid who thinks I'm a superhero, a man who looks at me like I'm not damaged goods. You're not damaged, Caleb said without hesitation. You've just been through hell. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you real. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. You didn't just pick me up that day, Caleb. You saved me. I was ready to disappear. You gave me space to land. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. And you gave this house a heartbeat again, he said gently. You brought laughter back into this place. You fixed the leaky sink. Noah with his school project taught him discipline I never could. You belong here, Dani. Whether it's for a while or more. Their fingers tightened together. No promises were made, no confessions spoken aloud. But something solidified between them. A mutual recognition of what they were building. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, not the kind that burned bright and faded fast. This was slower, steadier, something forged through shared grief, everyday kindness, quiet healing. The next morning, Caleb found Dani and Noah in the yard, building what looked like a crooked birdhouse out of scrap wood and elbow grease. We're calling it the Eagle's Nest, Noah said proudly. It's for tough birds who need a home. Dani smiled over her shoulder. Seems fitting. Caleb watched them for a moment, feeling something bloom in his chest that he hadn't dared hope for in years. Peace. That night, he pulled out an old photo album, one he hadn't opened in a long time. He showed Dani pictures of Laura, of their wedding. Baby Noah with his toothless grin. Dani listened without flinching, her hand resting on Caleb's knee. She would have liked you, he said quietly. She had a way of knowing good people when she saw them. Dani felt tears prick her eyes, but they didn't fall. I'm not replacing her, Caleb. I know, he said. You're not supposed to. You're just... And so, life continued, simple, imperfect, but full. Dani stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because, for the first time, she didn't want to go. She planted flowers in the garden with Noah. She applied for a permanent position at the security company. She even began seeing a therapist in town, someone Caleb gently suggested. And to her surprise, she agreed. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some nights she still jolted awake from nightmares. Some days she still walked with invisible armor wrapped tight. But now there was a hand to hold when she shook, a voice that reminded her she was safe, a boy who ran into her arms like she was his whole world. One afternoon, months later, as they sat together watching a spring rain fall gently against the windows, Dani turned to Caleb. I never thought love could look like this, she said quietly. What does it look like? He asked, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. She rested her head against his shoulder. Like warm pancakes and Saturday cartoons, paint-stained hands and backyard messes. Like someone saying, "You're coming with me," and actually meaning it. Caleb smiled, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Then I'll keep saying it. Every day you let me." And in the soft, slow rhythm of healing hearts, they found something neither of them had expected. Not rescue. Not romance. But a family, built not out of perfection, but out of choice.